Hi, I'm Javi,
I'm Virginia.
and we're here with Aziza Robinson-Goodnight, and we're going to be interviewing her about a lot of the work that she's done and about herself. And this is the Chosen Podcast. So we're going to start it off just with a rapid fire. We're going to go back and forth asking very surface level questions, just kind of get us warmed up, get everything started. What is, in a sentence or two, how you describe the Boston art scene?
Ooh. How I describe the Boston art scene. It's doing its thing. It's doing its thing. I'd like to see more autonomy and community around the Boston art scene like we did in the past. Less control. But, people got to make money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's true. But speaking of art, when it comes to art, there's a lot of colors that you see. But what's your favorite color? You would say
Black.
black.
Black is the embodiment of all colors.
You're right.
What's your favorite food?
Ooh, I love to eat, but I love spaghetti. Simple side of spaghetti.
What would you say is a recent book that inspired you?
Oh, The Back of the Hiring Line. Back of Hiring Line is a book about how policies in America have put Black America to the back of the hiring line.
Who's your favorite musician at the moment, if you have one?
The Fields.
How'd you find out about her?
How to find out about her?
Mm-hmm.
Listening to music. I don't know. I don't know how I found out about her. That's an interesting question. I think it's when the Hours song came out, and yeah.
We're gonna jump away from the rapid fire segment, and me and Virginia are going to ask you a couple questions about childhood upbringing, what brought you to where you are today, and then we're gonna get into some questions about your reparations work and other work that you're doing currently. And so, I wanted to ask how growing up in the artistic environments that you did, how do you think that shaped your perspective on community work?
I always say that it takes an artist to see the full potential of a community. Mm-hmm. So being able to, because I grew up in the arts. Yes, both my parents are artists. I grew up at the piano factory. I studied art. I taught art for 15 years. So I've been super immersed in the art, not always by choice, but I appreciate being able to have such wide perspective because of it. I could see things in places and people that make me sound crazy sometimes.
I mean, the way I like to think of it a lot is that an artist and there is a little bit of danger to it, but an artist can see the finished product from a couple lines or a couple drum beats. And so, whether or not it's there, it's a trap that can be fell into of seeing the final vision and then not acquiring it because you can already see it. But it's definitely, I think that's what makes an artist or a creative.
Definitely.
Also, another question would be how did going to Hampton shape your life overall?
Oh my God. I love Hampton University. This is my 20th reunion year. Wow. So that question is so. Hampton was everything. Going to a HBCU is I think every Black person should experience an HBCU at least for a semester. A semester could set the trajectory of your life because it feels like a hug. like a big hug from the community. You don't just have one table, or a little building on campus. Like the whole thing is yours. When I went into Hampton University, some schools that tell you look left, look right, you're not gonna be here with the whatever person. Hampton University says look left, look right, you are the best of the best. Like, so they instilled in us from like our freshman year, like, you're the best. Hampton is the most prestigious HBCU there is. We are the Harvard of HBCU, so the school really nourished my practice. Like, I got to study art with wonderful professors. John Biggers, who's my dad's mentor, also did like these three-story murals at Hampton University. And Hampton was my 16th choice. I applied to 16 school. Hampton was the last one. But because my father's mentor met his wife there, and she spoke so beautifully about it, I went.
I feel like that's also, so you brought up your father, and I've personally been very curious about this for a long time. Me and you both have fathers who are artists and hold similar spaces to us in an artist sense, but also in a sense of community cultivation. So I've always been curious as to how you're able to find a balance between carrying on his legacy and also defining your own.
Oh, it's I'm still trying to figure it out. This is why I exist in a space that he's not in. Because my father is a giant in the art world. He's a giant in the art world across the world. And so I live in a shadow. So I use my name to make sure I can do what I do. I leverage my privilege to do work in community. Like that's my balance, leveraging the fame to do work for community, like Robin has.
Like, with that, how do you navigate honoring history while fostering change?
History is the base to my work. If I didn't know where I came from, I couldn't do the things that I was gonna do. Or like, I fight for reparations. Reparations is a 400-year-old plus fight. I'm just sitting on the backs of my ancestors, like, and this is the time and space to actually do that work now.
That's actually a really good segue. If we can bring in the reparations talk, I want to ask you, what do you feel like are the things about reparations and the reparations movement that are most often misunderstood?
People don't know what reparations is. Like, that's the most misunderstood thing, is that folks don't know what full repair looks like. And then so like, folks that look like us, we can't fully envision repair because we've been like held down for so long, and then our oppressors are trying to figure out like what to do. So it's it's a tug and pull between like really concentrating on the ground and like sharing the light of what, like, who we are, what we're owed, what like what is reparations. It's not just a check. It's not a check. Is it's necessary, but it's not just a check. There's a holistic repair to reparations. The piece of reparations that it's just trying to get us as a community to that understanding is the biggest thing.
I think that's a really good, you answered a lot of questions with that one answer in a way that I really appreciated. I think definitely that also kind of speaks on what you said earlier about how it takes an artist to cultivate community, and that if you're striving for something that has not been known, like freedom or liberation, that's not something that's been, I don't know anyone who would say that they've been free or that they've been liberated. And so in that sense, when you're striving for something that hasn't been known, it takes, even if it doesn't take an artist specifically, it takes an artistic or a creative mind in order to envision something that has yet to exist.
That's true.
And so I think I really appreciated the way that kind of brought that idea, I guess.
And with reparations, like, do you think it's something that should like be started like nationally or looked at nationally, or should it like start with like individual states?
Well, it's happening in both ways at the moment. Like, there's a nation of us organizers in our own cities and states and towns that are working on this. So it's happening. It's happening nationally. It's happening locally. All the small municipal fights. Look at Brooks Beach. They won $6 million, for the beach. They should have got more, but that's a fight. You look at Asheville, North Carolina, who has their reparations stakeholder authority, which is 120 grassroots organizers that convene and talk. You look at Evanston, Illinois, and you look at they're actually giving out reparations, and so is Amherst, Massachusetts. So we are also, and then you just look at all these small fights. We're all talking to each other. Right. So it is a national and a local and a global. It's all of that, and it all has to happen in succinctly so that we're all coming up at the same time.
Yeah.
Can I ask, is it just the same type of methodology, or is it in any way directly inspired by the civil rights movement of the 60s in the way that it was like, you're going to have 40 lawsuits across different towns and states, but they ended up culminating into a major one?
Ooh, that's a great question. Civil rights movement. I'm in a space where I'm like, the elders fought in the civil rights movement are still in this movement.
Yeah.
They're still in this movement, but it's almost like it needs to like shift a bit. There's a lot of things that happen in the civil. We talk about that after Donald Trump literally just like through executive orders debunked literally everything, which isn't like horrible. It isn't horrible. Rome has to fall someday. Like, the only way to rebuild is to destroy. And so, civil rights movement, in my eyes, this is no disrespect to the work that was done. It created an illusion that we were free.
Yeah.
The work, I will never disrespect the work, but it was almost like, what's next? And then we had the crack era. So then we had separation of families. We had all these. I was literally listening to a podcast by Nkechi Taifa, who's a national rock star in the movement, and a mentor of mine and a big sister. And she talked about the crack era. So you had this beautiful era, like civil rights movement. We're all holding hands. It seems wonderful and kumbaya. And then you have the crack era, and you have extremely like families that were separated. You have the elite that don't understand what's going on in the hoods, and you just have mayhem and chaos. So we were broken up at all levels during that. So all owed to the fighters during the civil rights movement, but I don't think we even the history of the true story is not even being told of that movement.
Definitely not. I'm curious, so you stated how the crack era directly preceded followed, succeeded the civil rights movement, and that's very similar to me in the way that Jim Crow directly followed Reconstruction, and it's this pattern in which there's a movement, and it's a powerful movement, and it leads to progress, but not full success yet, and then it is immediately met by this massive wave of reimplementation in a new form. And so I'm curious what kind of steps would be taken in this next step that's trying to be made to avoid that.
So one of the things with reparations is, one of the forms of reparations is, like not repeating the same patterns. So like protection from the oppressors for repeating the same patterns. When we think about what has happened, like you said, Jim Crow, and then civil rights, and it just like almost like there has to be in law that there's protected class, like certain people have protected class, so not repeating the offenses, and there's a actual like there's consequences to repeating those offenses. You can't stop and frisk. You can't continue the same racial practices. You can't. We won't need DEI if these practices didn't continue.
Now, if there was like an opportunity given to you where you could take a reparations tax from like any big company, what company would you take from and why?
The U.S. government. The biggest corporation.
Yeah.
That owes us a debt.
Mm-hmm. I would say so, yeah. Oh, it's a lot too. Yeah.
This is a more direct question about the movement, but in your vision, what would distribution look like, and more specifically, how would qualifying look like?
Okay, so there's a debt that's owed that has to be paid.
Yes.
So when we talk about distribution and who qualifies for that debt, there is clear knowledge, clear research on who's owed that. But with reparations, like I say, it's not just a check. There are programs that need to be put in place. There are future laws that need to be put in place. There's also restitution for other folks that might not have built the country, but have experienced the same harms because they might look like the folks that built the country. So there's multiple layers because it's so complicated, especially here in Massachusetts with our makeup, because we are the world here. You know what I'm saying? We have folks from everywhere in Boston. We have the largest population of Black immigrants in the nation. Nowhere else experiences the same kind of things, tugs and pulls, and the things that we experience here. And the reparations space allows us as a whole to figure things out.
On a more specific note, that was a really great answer, Pepe. Thank you. I was curious as to someone from the Freedman tribe whose family has been in Mexico for 3 generations, or who has left the country in another capacity. What would including them in this process entail?
Well, I'm an American Freedman, so there has to be a way of identifying those families, because we've been pushed and pulled all over the country, all over the world, and it's not going to be hard to find 13% of population. That's not that hard to figure out, and folks know they've been displaced. So it's not like if there was a serious effort to make sure that folks who are American freedmen, are indigenous to this land, that have experience, it wasn't called gentrification. It was called, you know what I'm saying? Just go. You're not here no more. You're enslaved on this land. Now I'm gonna push you over to Mexico or wherever. Folks know, their history. So if there's literally, it said, the government owes descendants or American freedmen, folks would find their way. I'm sure. Yeah. People's grandpas and grandmothers and great aunts all know, the history is inside of us, and it's passed down.
I guess I was kind of wondering about, what work is, being done or put into action about reshaping the idea of reparations, so it's not just seen as how you said just a check, because a lot of people have that idea about it. So
there are lots of organizations that are out there creating space, doing the grassroots work. My favorite group is the team from Tulsa. Tulsa, Tulsa, you guys know what Tulsa is. There's a wonderful team there on the ground. They're descendants. They're also from Creek Nation. They're American freedmen, and they do something called Black History Saturdays, and they are on the ground teaching, because I talk about Tulsa, but in Tulsa there was an air of erasure. So there are folks in Tulsa that are descendants of folks who were in that massacre
Yeah.
that don't know.
I was watching a documentary on this recently.
But there's folks that don't know, and they live in Tulsa. And so there's folk, like I said, that Councilwoman Christy Hill Harper, Vanessa Hill Harper, oh my gosh, Christy Williams, like they're rock stars in the movement. And that sort of thing is what needs to happen all over the country, is just like getting back to like teaching. Just teaching, like what is reparations? Like that's what my organization, Repair America Collective, created. We created basic tools. We have a palm card, looks like a party flyer, and it says, what is reparations? According to the UN. And then there's a workbook, so you can work through, you guys saw it, right?
Yeah.
The workbook, I should have brought it. You can work through like the 5 forms of reparations with your family, with your friends, within your school. So it's just, there's just small things that folks are doing now that the movement is actually building up again after 30 years?
Yeah.
But we're here.
And it's exciting to see a movement that many people have disregarded in terms of that already happened or that is too late.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the narrative change on it live, and it's very exciting. My friend who's also doing TCP, we came up with most of these questions together, and my friend who was also part of TCP Cashin had a question that was just really great question to me. Gave him an intro in the question,
Okay.
but the question was in its basis, how do you, in implementing reparations, how would you avoid any form of victim savior complex from forming on either side?
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And that's part of the repair, like understanding that this is traumatizing to us. It's a traumatizing space. Victim savior mentality. You know, there's already like white churches saying, "Oh, we have $10 million." Victim savior mentality. It's happening, and there's already folks like, "Oh, like crying out, I need it." It's happening, and that's part of our trauma. That's part of our. There's a doctor that has been studying, a researcher, post-traumatic slave syndrome. It's a real thing, PTSD, and that has to be a real diagnosis, a real medical diagnosis, because that's what we're experiencing. The victim savior mentality is that's our PTSD, post-traumatic slave syndrome. So. It's not like you can, even in the Heritage Hub that you helped be a part of, there were things that happened. That was 5 days. The trauma comes up. And you just have to be ready to put out fires. And provide supports that allow people to deal with their own trauma.
So this is kind of bouncing off of like arts and stuff, but how do you feel like, what examples would you use to foster like systemic change, like art-wise?
For me, permanent art in spaces, and creating spaces where there can be permanent like art activities or things done is could create sustainable change, because you can have generations of folks that are engaged with that space. I fought a lot for permanent space so that we're not experiencing gentrification. But it's still happening, it's still happening. It's happening even faster than when T and I were younger. But one of the things that I'm really proud of is that I'm the chair of the Frederick Douglass Sculpture Project, and the bronze sculpture that's going to be built on the corner of Hammond and Tremont in Frederick Douglass District. A lot of people don't know that's the Frederick Douglass District. But that bronze sculpture will be there for decades. Will be there for centuries, and that's a form of sustaining us and who we are in space, and creating systemic change. So nobody can say, "Oh, that didn't happen. That didn't exist."
Do you feel like more pieces like that should be placed in like not only like areas of Boston that, you know, because I'm familiar with seeing art pieces of like black art and black works and stuff in like Dorchester, Roxbury, and like certain parts. Do you think black art like that should be spread across like Boston? Not even just Dorchester, but like probably like, you know, Milton or like places like way out. Like
but
that.
we existed in all these places. Like, what a lot of things that people don't know is that we had towns all over Massachusetts that were covered over by swamps, just like Lake Lanier, just like the sundown towns. Yes, white people need to know our history too, the history in the land that they sit on. Yes, it needs to happen. That's the only way that, like, if you could allow people to ignore the history of a group of folks, they're going to, especially if it doesn't benefit them. So yes, we existed all over this nation, all over these places, especially in Massachusetts. We think about think about Beacon Hill. What do you know about Beacon Hill? Do you know that we were half of that neighborhood? It used to be called something else that refers to us Hill. Half of Joy Street, the first black church, is in Beacon Hill. Like, how do they know that? Like, that's one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. There's $10 million condos down there. But do they know? Like, I've had a person down there tell me, go back to your neighborhood. This is my neighborhood. Beacon Hill is my neighborhood. But they don't know that. So yes, everywhere. Bronze, so it could be there forever. Not a graffiti. I'm sorry. I love the graph world. Yeah. But I think it's being abused. It is. And that's what I fought for and against before it even got to that point. But it's just using like, oh, this pretty picture that can be put up real quick and taken down real quick.
Yeah, literally.
I really appreciate that kind of staunch acknowledgement of how you can consciously avoid erasure, because I've been learning a lot lately about the Lost Cause movement down south, and it's far from, it's one of the most jarring things I've learned. It's also interesting to see how it's been, the same ideologies it's not limited to the Lost Cause movement. There are Lost Cause or Lost Cause adjacent movements throughout America, and especially they are very prevalent in Boston. And like you said, Beacon Hill, you can correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Joy Street was longer, and then they changed the name of half of it.
Yeah, right? They used to call it M Hill. You know what I'm saying? Like, what they called us, it was that. Because we were there, and we were, you know, we had businesses. It wasn't like we were poor black people over there. Like, we were really thriving. And we push from there, South End. We have thriving businesses in the South End. Push. Eminent domain, urban renewal. Let's just steal their homes and their businesses and just say that it's because we built on a highway. Like, all those things.
So bouncing off of that, what are like some ways that modern day artists, or like any artist in general, could like contribute to that movement of like bringing more black art into the streets, into the world in general?
Fighting to keep their artwork permanent. Or like a sustained space where, you know, to create art. We've been displaced in so many ways. Like, you think about the Piano Factory community. That's the community I grew up in. Prior to it being owned by a landlord, the artists existed in that building.
Right.
So if you look at the play Rent or the movie Rent, that's about the director from Rent lives in the Piano Factory. So that's more about the Piano Factory than it is about New York City or whatever they say it's about. And like not allowing, like, the landlord bought that building in partnership with the city for $50,000. That is pennies. That building's worth like millions and millions of dollars right now, and you got it for $50,000 in partnership with the city. And the city allowed the landlord to use the artist, the culture, to turn over that building into a market rate building. So those are the things that can't happen.
Yes. I'm wondering how you say, as the reparations movement, and you've touched on this a little already, the reparations movement is the dynamic and the mindset towards it is shifting nationally, personally, and how do you think the people who just took office, how does that impact the movement?
I actually think this is in this space we have have an opportunity.
Education, as much as it is a tool for those who are being educated, is a tool for educators, and as a tool it can be used to uplift or to subjugate. And I'm lucky enough that I'm in one of the few AP African American Studies that's classes in high school that I have that opportunity, but most schools don't offer that course. Most high school history classes that are teaching American history aren't touching on the reality of that course as the majority of American history. Like the vast majority of impactful events, shaping events, formative events in American history, I didn't get in my U.S. history class. I got in my African American Studies class. And so I think shaping the narrative on education is definitely massive.
Yeah, especially when formative years, people are learning a false reality.
Yes.
U.S. history,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever that is. Formative years, like you're literally your brains are being shaped to think one thing that is not even true. Yeah. That's beautiful that your school has that, but it should be a requirement.
That's what yes. And honestly, it shouldn't need to be a course. When you're teaching a American history class, there's no reason that the only reason that divide in that separate course needs to exist is because it's been neglected. And so
And I feel like, sorry to cut you up,
no, you good.
but okay, the school I go to, like, they never, like, I've never been offered a class like that at all. And schools that I went to growing up, like, were like Christian Catholic schools, like private schools and stuff like that. So I feel like, not to say that they wouldn't, but like I feel like of course they wouldn't teach us about that, because I feel like that wouldn't seem as important. And it also feels like the only time where we really would learn about like Black leaders and stuff like that would be around February, like Black History Month. And it was all like, it would always confuse me, because like the rest of the year we would just learn about completely other people. But whenever February came, I just noticed like a pattern of learning about the same people. Not to say that, you know, it's like boring learning about them, but it's just, you know, I've been learning about MLK since third grade. And so I was confused. Like,
And you don't learn the
thing.
real about MLK.
Yes,
like you learn the docile pastor, father. Like you don't learn the real, like the reason why he was shot. Like he was fighting for reparations in that space. Like he's literally telling us we were integrating into a burning house. We need to separate. Like the things he like. It's wild that they do that. And you know, Black History Month. And it's crazy that that's like that, because I went to a private Christian school.
Yeah.
But I learned everything about myself. All my classmates, I didn't go to Catholic school. That I think there's a difference. All my classmates look like me. My principal looked like me. My teachers look like me. I learned about me. But when I went to high school, it was like, what? What are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to teach me? Like, it was almost like I was a jerk. Now I'm being the jerk because you're teaching me something I know is not true. Or trying to teach you something that I know is not true. So it's important to have those formative years, like that stuff drilled into you. But also, like I said, every Black person should go to HBCU for at least a semester. It rewinds the time.
Yeah. If I was like advocating for like, you know, more lessons about Black history, and like how you were telling Javi how it shouldn't be like a class that you like choose to take, it should just be a class. What would be like some challenges that maybe I would face if I were trying to speak up about that?
Inclusion? Oh, stop calling it inclusion. It's history. Like, why are we not learning the full history? Like, speaking as if it is what it is, instead of being like, I want to be part of this thing. No. You created this thing. You know what I'm saying? Your ancestors created this thing.
Right.
You know, like, why are we telling the full history of something? Not, I need to be included. Not, I need this extra boost from anyone. Like, no, we created this nation. We created everything in this nation, like, except for the patent. And the patent was created by what? White people, so they can say they created shit. Excuse me. Sorry. And just, like, be confident. Like, it's not, you're not doing me a favor. Like, you're doing other people a favor for...
Right.
Your focus, at least externally, is currently on community organization and not necessarily on art, even though there is so much intersection between them. But I'm curious what you do more on a personal level now to fulfill your artistic appetite, if you do.
I don't do as much as I should. I express myself visually, creatively, but I need to get back more into creating. I don't. The art space is you know, like, it's... I fight for reparations because the art space has become super capitalistic and super, like, if you're not doing this thing at this time now, you can't make money. I'm a fine artist that crosses genres, so I need to get back into just creating. I used to teach art, which sparked my creativity. I don't do that anymore, and but in my professional career, one of the things that I've honed in on is arts activism. So I use creativity in my activism, in my space, and how I think about it.
That actually segues into another question that I haven't had written down, which is that I was wondering if you more directly as like a guide, not necessarily step by step, but like advice towards how artists in the moment can use their art to positively affect the reparations movement and the narrative on reparations.
Just create things that tell a message that repair needs to happen. Create music, do protests. I say that in a certain way. I don't believe in frontline protesting anymore. When I say that, when I talk about creatives and how they can use their art, I don't think that we should be in the front line anymore. I think that our revolutionary space is with joy, and not being angry about the world anymore, but creating the beauty. Like, create music that tells about a beautiful future. Create art that shows a beautiful future. We have the Afro tech movement. What is it called? Afro tech. What is it called? I don't know. Like the Afrofuturistic movement. Like
yes,
that. I love Afrofuturism. Like, I think that it's dope. Like, because, like, who are we in the next 10 years? Like, who are we in the next 100 years? And, like, what are we creating for ourselves? We can't allow people to keep saying, oh, we're poor soul, whatever, sad people, or whatever. Like, be revolutionary by being great. Use your art by being wonderful and telling a story, telling the history to the present, to the future. That's how I would encourage.
That's I really like the way you framed that answer. I liked said a lot of great things just now. Specifically, what stuck out to me was the question of where are you 5 years from now? Where are you 100 years from now? And kind of that was an interesting notion to me, because a lot of people, like what you kind of touched on in that sentence, will struggle to necessarily envision directly where are you personally going to be in 5 years. So as a community, it's an adjacent sort of thing of most communities struggle to, or at least haven't successfully come together and said, this is where we see ourselves 100 years from now. Mm-hmm. And I think that the organization to solidify what that vision is really important as much as striving towards that vision is. Because there's a lot of, as much as I say freedom or liberation, I know what that means to me on a personal level. Freedom and liberation might have a different definition for you, different definition for you, different definition for Gina and Tia. And in that way, there needs to be some form of understanding of this is what freedom means as a community. This is what liberation means as a community, because otherwise it is people striving as a community towards individual goals.
And that's what we've been doing. That's what we've been doing. But like I said in the beginning, it takes an artist to see the full potential of the community, right? So I would encourage creatives to use their creativity to bring together a collective vision for the future.
Obviously, we're talking to you and we're interviewing you, which is awesome, by the way. But we very obviously did research. And something that I noticed when I was preparing questions and when we were researching this group was that when you search your name into the Google engine, which Google's not the best, but we can push off of that. There's a lot more information that is brought and that is pushed about the Goodnight and the Robinson, and that was in both my personal curiosity and my curiosity towards people who are listening to get to know you and to get to know what you're about. What is that history that you'd like to share, at least, of the Robinson side of your family?
Robinson side of my family? So there's two sides of my family. My mom is a Robinson. My grandparents, Robinsons. My family came from the South after World War II to Boston. South End first. That's the Robinson side of me. And my grandfather had 16 brothers and sisters. So they came up one by one, little by little, bought house, bought homes. My grandfather's one of the first black bar owners in Massachusetts. So that side of my family is a lot different than the Goodnight side, because the Robinson side had to hold down a different weight. Owning a bar comes with a lot of in Boston, this is a mob city. Yeah. The Irish and the Italians were not okay with black men making money.
At all.
Black families making money. What you call the lottery now used to be called the black pool, because black people, they didn't say black, they said something else, just like Beacon Hill, Joy Street. But it was a space where black business owners could make money in the gambling space. It's not whatever, but and you see the states took it on as their own force of revenue, because we live in a mobster city. Then you talk about the Robinson side of me. My grandfather had 13 grandchildren. I'm one of 9 boys. Yeah. We all grew up in the crack era. At the same time, my grandfather had a bar. So the reality of that side of my family is totally different. I love everything about my family, but there's a different reality on that side. We talk about the Goodnight side. My father came to Boston. He also is a veteran. He was in Vietnam War, and he came here to save his life. He's from Chicago. He came here, and the art saved his life. He was always creative, and he became a world famous artist. So that side is a little more like peaches and cream. It's like I'm so duality in itself, because of the Robinson side and the Goodnight side. I don't know any other Goodnights. It's me and my dad and my daughter, and the opportunity to actually continue and build a legacy of on the shoulders of what my father was able to accomplish. I'm gonna do it. Yes, it comes up. Goodnight's gonna come up all the time. I attempted to run for city council, and I didn't even make the ballot. But of course, I had newspaper articles call. I'm sure you've seen that too. They're calling me. They're asking me questions, only because of the name. So I use it. I use it to the full advantage of working in community. I use it.
Have you ever looked deeper into the Goodnight name, like the meaning behind it, or like have you ever like broken it up?
I haven't. I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
My father has, but I have not. No. I know way more about my Robinson side.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a foster child, so I grew up with
Yeah.
I grew up with the Robinsons,
Mm-hmm.
and the Robinsons took in my father.
Robinsons.
He's he's a good night, but like he's part of the family.
Yeah.
So I know way more about my family in the South, in Memphis, Tennessee, than I do.
Mm-hmm.
Something has been done, something hasn't been done. Maybe not a thing, maybe an idea. If 50, 100, 200 years from now, you can be remembered off one thing, one movement, one idea, what would your ideal thing be?
It'd have to be in the reparations space. I want to create a space where Black folks from around the world, and I say Black, loosely, can come and find repair, and get repair, can repair themselves, can be amongst other individuals, space where like we come together as a nation and we think in this country, like a reparatory dream, like a reparatory space, like that is my dream, is that I want to leave a space that diplomats come to, that Black politicians go to repair, 40 acres of it.
Yeah.
40 acres. That is definitely that is me. Like I want to continue to see us get reparations. The reparations fight is gonna, but I want us, in my lifetime, I want us to receive, the start of repair, and to create a space to help to sustain that repair, like internal repair that we need as well.
I guess one question I had was, what's like a specific piece of advice you would give to like the youth?
Believe in your dreams, not just hold on to them. Believe in them, and find the folks that are not just like tolerant of you, but are appreciative and support those dreams. Not like, oh, maybe you should do this. No, that's your dream. You see it. Who are the folks that are like, all right, let's go. What do you need? Like, that's my, because especially your generation, you have so many tools in your wheelhouse to actually now live your dreams. Do it.
I think most definitely the best squads, the best friendships, the best chosen family is a mutual fandom. So like, if you're forming a relationship with someone and you don't in some capacity, how big or small, aspire to be like them, and they don't in some capacity, no matter how big or small, aspire to be like you, then that's when, that to me is the line of a relationship of substance in a relationship that is lacking. And that's really good advice.
Yeah, and you should be like I said, I taught for 15 years. Like, young people make me happy. Like, you guys make me happy. Like, adults, like, I'll show up for you guys any day.
Thank you.
I think now is where we start to wrap up. So I'm gonna give you I guess first, quick moment to share all the where you'd like people to find you, where you'd like people to find and connect to reparations, and all of those different things.
Where you can find me on Instagram, Aziza Robinson-Goodnight. If you're interested in being involved with the collective, Repair America Collective, you can find on Instagram as well. You can email us at repairamerikacollective@gmail.com.
What would you like the last note? What would the words that you would like to leave listeners and leave us with today?
Reparations now. Yeah. Like, it's time for us to live our realities. As Black people, I don't say that other whatever people use. But the time is now. Reparations now. Like, this is a good time for us.
All right. You have anything you'd like to say, Virginia?
No, I think that wraps it all up.
All right. Thank you, Aziza. Thank you, Boston. Good night.
Absolutely brilliant, guys. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
For your first interview.